The moment he laughed, something inside me shattered irreparably, as if a cold wind swept away the last warmth I had left. Your mother is gone, and this is how you respond, I whispered, my voice breaking like brittle glass on the floor. But he just chuckled, his eyes flicking to his phone, then back to his smirk. I couldn't believe the man I married, the one I trusted with my heart and soul, could be so callous. It felt like I was watching a stranger playing with my grief. In that instant, I realized that my pain was not just mine to bear. It was a fault line threatening to tear apart everything I thought I knew. This wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about what we had become, what he was no longer capable of being. Before that dreadful night, life had its quiet rhythm in our home. We lived in a modest townhouse in Lahore, a space filled with the smells of cardamom, brewing and morning chai and the rough texture of an old quilt my mother had stitched herself. Our family wasn't large, as 2 children. A shared desk where I worked from home editing scripts, and my husband's cluttered corner with his laptop and stacks of bills. We managed, struggled, and found comfort in small routines. My mother was the heart of it all. She was 82 but still spry, with laugh lines that deepened whenever she smiled. She was the first to greet me each morning, the one who held my hand when the days were heavy. I still remember the warmth of her kitchen, that faint scent of thyme and jasmine drifting through the air while she hummed old songs from her youth. My husband, Omar, was the quiet sort, a project manager at a local software firm, his voice usually low, his presence steady. We shared a history of 20 years, high school sweethearts who grew into adulthood together. We weren't perfect, but we had built a partnership that, to me at least, seemed unbreakable. Our children, Ion and Zara, were the little lights chasing after dreams of their own. Ion was in college, studying business, a gentle boy with a penchant for cricket and a laugh that could fill any room. Zara, younger by 5 years, was the fiery soul who would insist on debating politics before breakfast. Her words sharp but full of promise. Our evening dinners together were ordinary miracles no matter the day's weight. There was always a circle of familiar faces, sharing spiced rice, lentils, and laughter. The clinking of cutlery, the splash of water refilling glasses, and the hum of an old ceiling fan were the backdrop to our lives. But as the months wore on, subtle shifts began. It started with the way Omar's smiles grew forced, like a photograph held too long in the sun, colors fading into something dull and distant. His phone became a secret keeper, tucked away beneath pillows or under the edge of his laptop. Conversations, once warm and lingering, shortened into clipped replies and awkward silences. One evening, after a quiet dinner, I glanced across the table to find him distracted, his fingers rolling a pen as he stared at the wall. Is something wrong? I asked gently. He shook his head, but the crease in his brow betrayed him. The first real crack appeared when my mother fell ill. The doctors spoke cautiously about her frail heart and weakening kidneys. When I told Omar, hoping for a touch of comfort, he nodded absently, a flicker of impatience crossing his face. It unsettled me, but I told myself it was stress, work deadlines, late nights. Besides, he always pulled through, didn't he? Yet when the day came for the funeral, I expected him to be my anchor. Instead, as the crowd gathered and voices whispered prayers, Omar stood apart, smirking when I looked his way. Later, when I clenched my fists to stop myself from collapsing in grief, he blurted out a laugh, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed around the sterile hospital corridor. I wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could be so heartless, but the words caught in my throat, stunned by betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. Days passed in a fog of disbelief and sorrow. I tried to make sense of his laughter, of the cold distance he wore like armor. At home, the air grew heavy with unspoken words and the emptiness where my mother's presence once filled every corner. Then came the call from Omar's office. His boss Imran, a man known for his stern fairness, asked to meet me. My heart pounded with a strange mixture of hope and dread. Why would his boss call me? What dreadful news could wait behind that request? When I entered the office, Imran greeted me with a softness I hadn't expected, his eyes kind but firm. I heard what happened to your mother, he said gently. I also know about your husband's reaction. My throat tightened. You do? He nodded slowly. Omar's behavior was out of character. But there's more you should know. It's not just grief or stress. I think he's been struggling with things at work, but that's no excuse for disrespect. His voice lowered, almost a whisper. We had a serious talk yesterday. I told him that if he didn't make changes, not just professionally but personally, there would be consequences. It was the first time I saw him admit fault. For the first time since the funeral, a thread of understanding began to weave through the tangled mess of my thoughts. Omar's laughter wasn't just cruelty. It was a symptom of something deeper that neither of us had faced. Still, the damage was hurtling toward us like an unstoppable tide. The drive home felt longer than usual that day, as if the city's chaotic hum had slowed to a painful crawl, giving space for every thought to sink into my chest like a stone. Imran's words replayed in my mind. He admitted fault. A confession from Omar. That was new, and part of me clung to it as if hope could sprout from such a fragile admission. But hope is a tricky thing. It glows warmly one moment, and flickers dangerously the next. When I walked into our home, the familiar smell of cumin and coriander drifted from the kitchen where Zara was helping prepare dinner. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Ayan was sprawled on the couch, earbuds in, lost in some music or perhaps world-weary silence. Their youthful normalcy comforted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our family was unraveling beneath the surface. That night, Omar sat at the dinner table, quieter than usual, stirring his food without really tasting it. I caught his eyes for a moment. They were tired, burdened, but the warmth I once knew was almost extinct. For once, he didn't avoid my gaze, and I dared to ask, "Can we talk?" His fork paused, then slowly set down. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "I know I wasn't there for you. For your mother. I don't know what came over me." I nodded, swallowing the ache. "I just needed you." He hesitated, and then said, "Imran called me out. Said I was losing myself and maybe losing you." His honesty felt like a tentative bridge, fragile but important. But repairing what's broken doesn't happen overnight. In the following weeks, Omar tried to change. He stopped bringing his phone to bed, listened when I spoke more attentively, and came to Ayan's cricket matches with genuine smiles. Yet, under the surface, something still didn't sit right. His eyes would sometimes dart away after he smiled, and there were whispered phone calls when he thought I wasn't nearby. One afternoon, as I prepared tea, my hand trembled as I picked up his phone, left unattended on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't invade his privacy, yet the lingering unease in my gut urged me forward. The screen was unlocked, and a message preview peeked out. "Laughing at your misery was the best part. The boss approves." My heart stopped. The name attached was an unfamiliar number, but the tone was chilling, mocking, cruel. A surge of panic mixed with fury rose inside me. Was this a joke? Or had Omar's cold laughter been something darker than mere grief or stress? I confronted him that evening. "Who are you texting?" My voice barely hid the betrayal. He glanced up, catching the shock in my eyes. He sighed, a deep exhale as if a weight pressed down on his shoulders. "It's not what you think, but how could it not be?" As the days slipped on, the conversations between us became battlegrounds of silence and suspicion. I caught glimpses of his phone lighting up with those strange messages, his hurried steps out of rooms. The laughter, once cruel but isolated, had turned into something more ominous, threatening the fragile truce Imran and I had glimpsed. One evening, I decided to visit Omar's office under the pretense of delivering his forgotten papers. The sterile hallway smelled of fresh paint and polished floors, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in my chest. I waited near the receptionist, heart pounding like a drum in my ears, until Imran appeared. His eyes widened in surprise but softened when they landed on me. "Can we talk?" I asked, voice shaky but resolute. He nodded and led me to a small conference room. There, he leaned forward, the weight of his own battles visible in the lines around his eyes. "Omar's been under enormous pressure," he began carefully, "but his attitude toward your mother's death was unacceptable. I spoke to him directly, told him he needs to take responsibility, not just at work but at home." I swallowed hard, trying to piece together how much Imran truly knew. Then he said quietly, "There's more. Omar's been part of a malicious group that targets colleagues anonymously online. They joke, share cruel messages, and sometimes worse." A chill settled over me. "Is he one of them?" Imran hesitated but nodded. "He was involved. The laughter you heard wasn't just about grief. It was bullying. And when I discovered it, I warned him. If this continued, he'd be fired." The thought that the man I loved could be part of such bitterness felt like a cruel blow. One I wasn't sure I could survive. That night, I asked Omar directly, in the stillness of our dimly lit room, "Is it true? Are you one of them?" He sat in silence, the weight of my question pressing around us. Finally, he swallowed, voice low and fractured. "It started as a stupid joke, a way to blow off steam. But it spiraled. I didn't think it would hurt anyone." I looked away, tears burning silently. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a fragile whisper. "You laughed while my mother was dying." His answer was just a whisper too, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But sorry didn't erase the hollow ache or the night. His laughter echoed in my ears. The days that followed felt like walking through a thick fog, where everything familiar became foreign. Omar retreated further into himself, his apologies repeating but emptying with every breath. His job at the company became a shadowed chapter. Imran's warnings had turned serious, and whispers of consequences flitted through my mind like unwelcome ghosts. I wrestled with my own heart, each day torn between years of love and the unbearable sting of betrayal. The man who once held my hand through every storm now hid behind walls of silence, while the laughter that cut me deepest echoed relentlessly in my memory. I knew I had to act not out of anger, but to save myself and the family I refused to lose. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, I sat across from Omar at our old wooden dining table. The warm glow of the pendant light above barely softened the tension gripping the air. I called Imran today, I said gently, watching his face tighten. He wants to meet us both, to talk about what comes next. Omar's silence was heavy, and when he finally spoke, his voice cracked like dry earth. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't expect you to fix everything overnight, I replied, but we can face this together, if you're willing. That night marked a fragile turning point. I realized healing would be uneven, painful, but maybe possible with honesty and real effort. At the office, the conversation with Imran was more than I anticipated. The room was stark, the chair cold beneath me, but Imran's steady eyes gave a strange reassurance. I want to give Omar a chance, I said quietly, but this group, this bullying, how deep does it go? Imran sighed. It's worse than we thought. It's a network of toxic influence spreading in our company. Omar's involvement was caught early, but others are deeper in. We're rooting it out, but it's slow. I nodded, feeling the weight of the social consequences ripple beyond our immediate family. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a stain on Omar's reputation, one that reverberated through friends, colleagues, even family we hadn't realized were watching. Through Imran's office window, I caught a glimpse of Omar standing alone in the courtyard, hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders slumped like a man carrying the world's grief on his back. Returning home that night, I found my community subtly shifting. The news had traveled faster than I expected. Neighbors who once greeted me with warm smiles now lowered their eyes. Friends who called less often slipped to one side. Even Zara told me, her voice small. Some students at school asked about Dad. They said things, not nice things. My heart cracked again, not just for Omar, but for our children caught in the reverberations of his failings. Parenting wasn't just about shielding their joy but holding steady through the storm of shame and judgment. Yet, in the midst of this unraveling, a surprising voice emerged. Omar's boss once again, at a local community meeting. Imran addressed the crowd and families affected by the scandal. His tone was firm but fair, emphasizing accountability over cruelty. I am here not to destroy but to correct, he said, eyes sweeping the room. We all make mistakes, but it is how we take responsibility that defines us. To my surprise, Omar was at his side, greeting those gathered with tremulous humility, acknowledging the hurt he caused. The scene was nothing like the cold man I had mourned days earlier. It was a public step toward rebuilding the fragile trust that had broken. With his social and professional consequences becoming apparent, Omar faced disciplinary action at work, reduced responsibilities, mandatory counseling, and community service within the company for awareness. Programs about workplace behavior and empathy. It wasn't a punishment but a reckoning, a chance to rise from the depths of his mistakes. At home, we began the fragile work of repair. Long talks stretched into the early morning hours. Tears shared and regrets voiced. Omar sought therapy, reaching out to understand the roots of his bitterness and cruelty, the pressure he'd buried, the bitterness he'd masked with laughter. I learned to listen without judgment, to hold back anger when it threatened to spill over, and to forgive not because I forgot but because healing required. Release the children. 2. Recovered in their own way. Ion's laughter returned slowly, and Zara's spark reignited with renewed confidence. Though the scars remained, so did the lessons. Months later, sitting in that same kitchen where my mother once hummed, I brewed chai infused with cardamom while Omar helped Zara prepare for her school debates. Do you think we'll be okay? Zara asked quietly, her eyes searching. I smiled, the familiar warmth returning like the first light of dawn. We will be, I said softly, because loving someone means holding their mistakes and helping them grow beyond them. And for me, that had become the truth, a moral almost my mother would have understood. The months after that pivotal conversation became a silent test of our endurance. Omar's steps toward change were uneven and fraught with hesitation. Some days, he appeared sincere and engaged. Other days, shadows of the old man flickered across his face, reminding me that healing is never a straight line. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light through the cracked kitchen window, I found Omar sitting at the dining table with a letter in his hand. The paper trembled between his fingers like a fragile bird caught in a storm. "I got this from HR," he said quietly. "They're opening a formal investigation not just into me, but the entire group behind the harassment." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of consequences yet to come. He looked up, eyes moist with vulnerability. "I'm ready to face it, whatever it takes." At home, the tension lingered but softened. Omar started attending therapy regularly and even invited me to join a few sessions. The first time we sat together in that quiet office, the therapist's gentle voice coaxed stories and feelings buried beneath years of silence. I saw a man wrestling with guilt he never showed before, a man trying, imperfectly, to reclaim the respect he had lost. One night, after a session, Omar said, "I want to make things right, not just with you, with myself, with the family, and with your mother's memory." I was a coward, and sometimes I still am. I reached across the table and took his hand, the warmth of a tentative bridge between our fractured past. Word about the investigation leaked quietly through the office grapevine. Some coworkers approached me, their voices a mix of apology and judgment. A few offered support those who had been victims of the toxic group. Quietly grateful I was standing by Omar but clear-eyed about the damage. At the same time, whispers sometimes cruel floated through social circles, and we felt the strain inside our close-knit community. Invitations dwindled. Neighbors' greetings became curt. One evening, at a friend's gathering, I overheard a hushed conversation. "Did you hear about Omar? That poor woman must be suffering so much." A voice near me replied, "I'm not sure I'd be so forgiving. Some things you can't get past." The sting was sharp and undeniable, yet, the path forward demanded dignity, not bitterness. Then came a moment that surprised me. At my workplace, where I freelance as a script editor, I received an unexpected call from Imran, Omar's boss. "Would you want to speak at our upcoming corporate seminar?" he asked. The seminar was about workplace respect and the dangers of online harassment. I don't know, I admitted. "Why me?" "Because your story matters. It's about consequences, redemption, and the real lives behind every action. People need to hear it not as judgment but as a lesson." I hesitated, then agreed. On the day of the seminar, standing in front of a sea of faces filled with curiosity and guilt, I shared the story as honestly as I could about loss, betrayal, laughter that cut too deep, and the long road toward forgiveness and change. There were tears in the room, nods of understanding, and the realization that silence and cruelty wound deeper than anyone wanted to admit. Afterward, Omar stood beside me, though his eyes held shadows of regret. There was also a spark, proof that even the coldest hearts can thaw. Back home that evening, the air was quiet but hopeful. Omar cooked dinner, a rare treat with shaky hands but steady determination. The smell of garlic and sizzling onions filled the kitchen, a small comfort after so many dark nights. Our children gathered around the table, laughter returning slowly like the blooming of spring after a harsh winter. In those simple moments, I understood that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but nurturing what lay ahead. One night, as we sat watching a faint cricket match on TV, Omar turned to me and said, "Your mother deserved better from me." I nodded. "She deserved better from us all." He swallowed, then whispered, "I'm trying to be better for you, for them, and for the memory of the woman who raised you." "I know," I whispered back. Sometimes, that was enough. The investigation wrapped up after several weeks, and the company decided on firm measures against the toxic groups, mandatory training sessions, and real consequences that sent a clear message through every department. Omar was allowed to stay on, but with conditions. His path to redemption would be public, slow, and scrutinized. Back home, the public nature of his consequences weighed heavily between us. Yet I noticed something remarkable. Omar was becoming more present, more accountable, not just to others but to himself. One rainy evening, the smell of wet earth rising from the garden mingled with the faint scent of cardamom. Chai, as Omar sat beside me on the porch swing, his gaze distant. "I want to tell Ayan and Zara everything someday," he said softly. "Not the ugly parts they shouldn't carry, but the truth. I owe them that." I squeezed his hand, grateful for this fragile honesty. Over time, the community's harsh whispers softened into cautious respect. People saw the effort, not just the failure. A neighbor who once crossed the street to avoid us now stopped for a brief smile. A friend who had been distant sent Zara a birthday gift with a handwritten note about forgiveness and moving forward. I realized healing was contagious, spreading in small gestures, quiet kindness that mended the cracks. Still, the deepest healing happened within our family's walls. One afternoon, Zara surprised me by pulling out an old photo album, a collection of snapshots and memories my mother had treasured. "Mom, I want to hear stories about Grandma," she said. I sat beside her, fingers tracing the worn edges of photographs while memories whispered through the room. She listened with wide eyes as I shared tales of my mother's courage, joy, and the strength that had shaped me. In that moment, I felt my mother's presence not as a ghost haunting us, but as a light guiding the way. Omar, too, began sharing memories. One evening, he pulled out a dusty scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings from his youth and photographs from university days. "There was a time I wasn't this man," he said, voice soft. "A time when laughter was genuine, not cruel." We looked through the pictures together, a quiet solidarity blossoming. Years passed, and though scars remained, so did growth. We learned that forgiveness is not a gift to the one who hurt you, it's a step toward freedom. The house grew warmer with the sound of children's laughter again, our evenings marked by conversations brimming with hope rather than silence. And then, one day, Omar surprised me with a small, wrapped box. Inside was a necklace, a simple pendant shaped like a heart with an inscription, "For strength in the darkest time." "I wanted you to have something to remember how far we've come," he said, my eyes filled, not with tears of sorrow but of quiet gratitude. Life would never be perfect. Loss and mistakes are part of its fabric. But in the embrace of truth and effort, we found the possibility of healing. Sometimes, the hardest journeys lead to the strongest places. The pain of losing my mother was deepened by the man I loved laughing at that grief. Yet, through the darkest betrayal and harshest consequences, I found that healing isn't about forgetting or perfect endings, it's about courage, forgiveness, and the willingness to rebuild broken trust. Have you ever faced a moment where someone's callousness broke your heart? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your thoughts below. Your story might be the light someone else needs. If this story touched you, please subscribe and support so we can continue sharing real, heartfelt stories from life's complex journey.